The lecture hall was massive. Hundreds of alien students sat in curved rows, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Some had scales, others had feathers, and a few seemed to float rather than sit. They all faced forward, waiting for the guest speaker to begin. Taman stood at the front of the room, his human form looking small compared to some of the larger species present. He was in his 40s, with gray starting to show in his dark hair. His military bearing was obvious in the way he stood, straight and confident. Behind him, a massive holographic display waited, ready to show whatever he commanded. Professor Velthor, a tall being with blue skin and too many arms, introduced him. The professor's voice was smooth, almost musical. He spoke about Taman's credentials as a military historian, carefully avoiding any mention of his actual combat experience. The students looked bored. Another human lecturer, probably here to talk about something quaint and primitive. In the third row, Hannah sat with her datapad ready. She was young, barely 22, with her black hair pulled back in a practical style. Unlike most of the other students, she sat forward paying attention. Her parents were diplomats who had taught her to respect all species equally. She wanted to learn. Next to her, a massive Threxian named Crix lounged in his seat. His species were natural warriors with thick armor-like skin and multiple arms built for combat. He found the whole thing amusing. Humans teaching warfare. It was like children teaching adults how to walk. Taman began without ceremony. He touched his control pad, and the holographic display came alive. It showed a city in winter covered in snow. Buildings were broken and burning. The simulation looked incredibly detailed. "This is Stalingrad," Taman said simply. "A city on Earth. The year was 1942 by our calendar. 2 human nations fought for control of this single location for 5 months. The hologram zoomed in, showing soldiers fighting building by building, room by room. The detail was disturbing. Bodies in the snow. Explosions destroying entire structures. The temperature reading showed -30 degrees. The battle lasted 163 days. Taman continued, his voice neutral. When it ended, nearly 2 million soldiers and civilians were dead. The city was completely destroyed. Nothing remained standing. A ripple of discomfort went through the audience. 2 million deaths for one city? That couldn't be right. The translator must have made an error. Crick spoke up, his voice loud and dismissive. "Your numbers are wrong, human. No species would accept such losses for a single tactical position. That violates every principle of proportionate engagement." Taman looked at him calmly. "The numbers are correct. And Stalingrad was not unique. It was simply one battle in a war that killed 70 million humans." The room went completely silent. Professor Velthor shifted uncomfortably in his seat at the back. He had reviewed Taman's presentation and had tried to get him to soften the numbers. Taman had refused. "That's impossible," a student with tentacles said softly. 70 million? That's more than died in the last 1,000 years of all galactic conflicts combined. "That was one war," Taman said. "One war that lasted 6 years. Earth has had thousands of wars. Some lasted decades. Some lasted a century or more. We have been fighting each other since before we developed written language." He changed the display. Now it showed different battles from different eras. Ancient warriors with swords. Medieval sieges. Trenches filled with soldiers. Modern armored vehicles. Each scene showed the same thing. Humans fighting humans with absolute commitment. "We call it total war," Taman explained. "When humans fight, we don't fight for advantage or territory or trade rights. We fight to win, completely. We commit everything we have. Every resource. Every person. Every weapon. We fight until one side cannot continue." Hannah felt her stomach turn. She had known human history was violent, but seeing it presented this way compared to galactic norms made it seem almost monstrous. Around her, students were whispering to each other, their various forms of communication creating a low buzz of alarm. Crick stood up, his large form intimidating. "This is barbarism. Your species should never have been admitted to the council. You're primitives who haven't evolved past basic aggression." Taman didn't react to the insult. Instead, he asked a question. "Tell me, Crix of Threxia, your people are warriors, yes? You pride yourself on combat prowess." "We are the finest warriors in the galaxy," Crix said with pride. "And when your people fight, what are your rules of engagement?" Crix looked confused by the question. "We follow the galactic conventions. Proportionate response. Clear declaration of intent. Protection of civilians. Preservation of infrastructure. These are the basics of civilized warfare. And if your enemy doesn't follow those rules, Taman asked, then they are criminals and will be treated as such by the council, Crix replied as if this was obvious. Taman nodded slowly. And there is the difference. Humans learned long ago that not every enemy cares about rules. Not every conflict can be resolved with proportionate response. Sometimes the enemy wants total victory. They want you dead, your cities burned, your people enslaved or extinct. What do the Galactic Conventions say about that? No one answered. The truth was the Galactic Council had never faced such an enemy. For thousands of years, all conflicts had been resolved through negotiation, limited warfare, and diplomatic pressure. The idea of an enemy who wanted complete annihilation was theoretical. Human warfare isn't taught in your academies, Taman said quietly, his voice carrying despite its softness. Not because it's primitive. It's not taught because it's too effective. Too terrible, too real. Your council doesn't want other species learning what humans know, that sometimes survival requires becoming something you never wanted to be. Professor Velthor stood up from the back. I think that's enough for today. We can continue this discussion next week. But before anyone could move, an alarm sounded, a harsh, urgent wailing that made everyone freeze. The holographic display automatically switched to a news feed. A reporter appeared, their feathered form ruffled with distress. We have breaking news from the frontier colonies. 3 settlements have stopped responding to communications. Initial scout reports indicate possible hostile action. Council forces are being mobilized. The students began talking all at once, their voices rising in concern and confusion. Hostile action? That hadn't happened in decades. The council had protocols for this. Everything would be fine. Hana looked at Taman. The human stood still, watching the news feed with an expression she couldn't quite read. It wasn't fear exactly. It was something else. Recognition, maybe. Or resignation. Professor, she called out, raising her voice above the noise. What do we do if the enemy doesn't follow council protocols? Taman turned to look at her. For a moment, their eyes met across the room. Then he smiled, but it was a sad smile, the kind that carried weight. Then you call someone who knows how to fight that kind of war, he said simply. Crix laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. We don't need human savagery. The council has handled every threat for thousands of years. This will be no different. Taman didn't argue. He simply began gathering his materials, preparing to leave. As he walked toward the exit, he passed by Hana's seat. Without stopping, he spoke quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. I hope your friend is right, he said, because if he's wrong, everyone is about to get a very hard lesson in why some knowledge should remain locked away. Hana watched him go, a cold feeling settling in her chest. Around her, students were already dismissing the threat, confident in the council's ability to handle any situation, but she had seen something in Taman's eyes. Experience, the kind that came from seeing theories become reality. She looked back at the news feed, still showing the breaking story. 3 colonies silent. Possible hostile action. Council forces mobilizing. It all sounded so controlled, so manageable, so civilized. Somehow she didn't think it would stay that way for long. 3 weeks had passed since the frontier colonies went silent. Now the number was 12. 12 colonies, millions of people just gone. The council's response had been exactly what their doctrine demanded. Measured, proportionate, and completely ineffective. Admiral Gyeong stood in the council's strategic command center, watching the tactical displays with barely contained frustration. She was a tall woman, her hair now more gray than black, with the kind of posture that came from decades of military service. She had been called in as a consultant 3 days ago. So far, no one had actually consulted her about anything important. On the main screen, another council fleet was preparing to retake one of the lost colonies. The enemy had identified themselves now. The Krethak swarm, they called themselves. A hive mind species from the outer rim that no one had considered a serious threat. They're walking into a trap, Gyeong said. Not for the first time. The Velthoran fleet commander, a dignified being named Kelrath, looked at her with polite patience. We have scanned the colony thoroughly. Our doctrine requires that we minimize damage to civilian infrastructure. The Krethaks are using the colony facilities as their base. Once we demonstrate superior force, they will negotiate. They're not going to negotiate, Gyeong said flatly. They're going to use your reluctance to damage the colony against you. They'll hide among the buildings, use civilian structures as shields, and pick your fleet apart while you follow rules they don't care about. Kelrath's expression didn't change. We cannot simply destroy a colony to retake it. That would make us no better than the enemy. Gyong wanted to scream. Instead, she kept her voice level. The colony is already lost. Everyone there is either dead or being used as slaves. You're not preserving infrastructure. You're preserving the enemy's fortifications. That is your opinion, Admiral, Kelrath said stiffly. We will proceed according to established protocols. Gyong turned away from him, looking for someone who might actually listen. She spotted Doyen across the command center. The young intelligence officer was hunched over his console, analyzing data with the focused intensity she recognized from her own early career. She walked over to him. Tell me you have something useful. Doyen looked up, his face tired. Depends on your definition of useful. I've been analyzing the Krethax tactics. They're good, Admiral. Very good. They've studied Council doctrine thoroughly. Every engagement follows the same pattern. Council forces arrive following proper protocols. Krethax exploit those protocols. Council forces retreat with heavy losses. They've done this before, Gyong said, understanding dawning. Multiple times over the past 2 centuries, Doyen confirmed. Small raids always pulling back before the Council mobilized serious forces. They've been testing, learning, preparing. This isn't opportunistic aggression. It's a planned invasion that's been in the works for decades. Gyong looked back at the tactical display. The Council fleet was moving into position now. Ships arranged in the standard defensive formation that left them vulnerable to exactly the kind of attacks the Krethax specialized in. How long until contact? She asked. 10 minutes, Doyen replied quietly. Gyong pulled out her communicator and sent a message to the one ship in that fleet with a human crew. The message was simple. Be ready to run. On that ship, Hana received the message. She had graduated early from the Academy when the war started, commissioned as a junior tactical officer. Her current assignment was as a liaison on a Veltheran cruiser. It was supposed to be a learning position. Instead, she was about to learn a very hard lesson. All ships, this is Fleet Command. Kelrath's voice came through the communication system. Prepare for engagement. Remember, our goal is to force negotiation, not destruction. Minimize collateral damage. Follow the conventions at all times. Hana watched her tactical display. The Krethax positions were scattered throughout the colony. Some were in factories, some in residential areas, some in schools. Anywhere that the Council fleet would hesitate to fire. This is wrong, she said to the Veltheran captain. The captain, a veteran named Telvor, looked at her with ancient eyes. War is always wrong, young one. That is why we fight it with honor and restraint. But they're not, Hana protested. They're not fighting with honor. They're using our restraint against us. Then we show them the proper way, Telvor said firmly. The first Krethax shots came from inside a hospital. The Council fleet couldn't return fire without destroying the building. Instead, they tried to target the specific weapon emplacements. It took too long. More shots came from a residential tower, then from a school, then from everywhere at once. The Council ships, bound by their doctrine, tried to respond with precision strikes. The Krethax simply moved their weapons to new civilian buildings. Within minutes, 3 Council ships were severely damaged. Within 10 minutes, 2 were destroyed. Fall back, Kelrath finally ordered, his voice strained. All ships tactical retreat. Hana's ship shuddered as a direct hit struck their aft shields. The lights flickered. Around her, crew members worked frantically to keep systems operational. Captain, shields are failing, someone shouted. Telvor's face was calm, but Hana could see his hands shaking slightly. He had never actually been in combat before. None of them had. Real combat against an enemy that wanted them dead. Hana, Telvor said quietly. Your people have fought wars like this? She nodded, not trusting her voice. What would a human do? He asked. Hana thought about the lectures at the Academy, about Taemin's presentation on Total War, about the things that weren't taught because they were too terrible. She thought about her parents who believed in diplomacy and peace. She thought about all the ideals she had grown up with. Then she looked at the tactical display showing Krethax positions throughout the colony, positions they held because the Council wouldn't destroy civilian infrastructure. A human would destroy the colony, she said softly. All of it. We'd deny them the fortifications, accept the losses, and end the battle in minutes instead of hours. Telvor was silent for a long moment. Then he shook his head. We cannot do that. We are not humans. Another hit rocked the ship. More systems failed. They were dead in space now, shields down, weapons offline. A sitting target, abandoned ship, Telvor ordered. All crew to escape pods. Hana made it to a pod with a dozen other crew members. As they ejected from the dying ship, she watched the tactical display in the pod. 7 council ships destroyed, 4 more crippled. The remaining vessels were fleeing. The Krethaks weren't even pursuing. They didn't need to. They had won by simply using the council's own principles against them. Back in the command center, Gyong watched the disaster unfold with a stone face. Around her, council officials were in chaos, voices raised in shock and disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't how warfare worked in civilized space. Speaker Thelnax, the head of the council, entered the room. He was old, even by his species standards, and had led the council through decades of peace. He looked at the displays showing their losses and seemed to age even more. Admiral Gyong, he said, his voice heavy, it appears we need your expertise after all. What do you recommend? Gyong turned to face him. I recommend you give me actual command authority, not just advisory status. I recommend you accept that this enemy doesn't care about your conventions. And I recommend you prepare your people for what real war looks like. We cannot simply abandon centuries of military ethics, Thelnax said. Then you'll lose this war, Gyong said bluntly. The Krethaks don't care about your ethics. They study them so they know how to beat you. Every principle you hold gives them an advantage. Every rule you follow is a weapon they use against you. The room had gone silent. Everyone was listening now. If we fight as you suggest, Thelnax said slowly, we become like them. We lose what makes us civilized. No, Gyong said. You become survivors. There's a difference between fighting to win and fighting for pleasure. The Krethaks enjoy cruelty. Humans don't. We just understand that sometimes survival requires doing terrible things. She gestured at the display showing the battle's aftermath. Right now you have a choice. Keep following your doctrine and watch your people die slowly, or give humans tactical control and accept that we'll do what's necessary to win. But understand this. If you ask us to fight, we'll fight to win completely. That means you won't recognize your nice clean galaxy when we're done. Thelnax looked at the displays again. More colonies were under attack. More ships were being lost. More people were dying while the council debated ethics and protocols. Assemble the full council, he said finally. We will vote on granting humanity military command. May our ancestors forgive us, Gyong nodded. She felt no satisfaction in being right, only the weight of what was coming. Because she knew what human warfare really meant. She had lived it. And now the galaxy was about to see it unleashed. The vote had been close, extremely close. But in the end, fear of extinction won over fear of change. Admiral Gyong now had full tactical command of all Council military forces. Within 48 hours, everything changed. Human ships began arriving from Earth and the human colonies. They weren't larger than Council vessels. They weren't more advanced. But there was something different about them. Something in the way they moved, the way they positioned themselves. Like predators, Hana thought, watching them take up formation around the Council fleet. She had been promoted to captain now, given command of her own ship due to the heavy losses the Council had suffered. It was a small cruiser with a mixed crew, both human and alien. The humans knew what was coming. The aliens didn't, not really. The first target was a colony that the Krethaks had taken 2 weeks ago. Standard Council doctrine would have been to attempt negotiation, then a careful assault trying to preserve infrastructure. Human doctrine was different. All ships, this is Admiral Gyong, the transmission came through. Her voice was calm, professional, and absolutely cold. Target package Charlie 7, you have your orders. Execute. Hana looked at her orders. Then she read them again, hoping she had misunderstood. She hadn't. Captain, her Veltharan tactical officer said, his voice shaking. These orders require us to destroy the orbital stations. There are civilians there, Council citizens who are prisoners. I know, Hana said quietly. We can't, the officer protested. It violates everything we stand for. Hana looked at him. Then she looked at her human crew members. They looked grim but determined. They understood. The Krithax would use those civilians as shields. They would drag out the battle, inflict maximum casualties, and eventually win through the Council's reluctance to accept hard choices. "Those civilians are already dead," Hana said, and the words felt like ash in her mouth. "The Krithax won't release them. They'll use them as hostages until we give up, then kill them anyway. We can either lose this battle and let them die for nothing, or win the battle and make their deaths mean something. That's not our choice to make," the Veltheran officer said. "No," Hana agreed. "But it's the choice the Council made when they gave humans command. Execute the orders." The orbital stations died in seconds, precise strikes from the combined fleet. No warning, no negotiation, just cold, efficient destruction. The Krithax forces on the surface suddenly had no orbital support, no resupply, no escape route. Then the real assault began. Human ground forces didn't try to minimize casualties or preserve infrastructure. They used overwhelming firepower. Entire city blocks were leveled to eliminate Krithax positions. Factories that could have been retaken were destroyed to deny the enemy resources. Commander Velshar watched from his ship, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. He had studied warfare at the Academy. He had read all the approved texts. Nothing had prepared him for this. "This is madness," he whispered. Colonel Minho, the human special forces commander coordinating the ground assault, heard him through the communication link. "This is war," he corrected, his voice carrying an edge. "Real war, not the game your people have been playing for centuries." "But the cost," Velshar said. "The destruction. How can you accept this?" "We accept it because the alternative is worse," Minho replied. "Every day we fight carefully, preserving buildings and following rules, is another day the enemy gets stronger. Another day they can prepare. Another day they can take more colonies. We end it now, brutally and completely, so we don't have to fight this battle 100 more times." The battle for the colony lasted 6 hours. A similar council assault would have taken weeks and probably ended in defeat. The human-led force won decisively, but the cost was visible in the smoking ruins below, in the debris field where the orbital stations had been, in the shocked faces of every non-human watching. Jahi sat in her quarters after the battle, still in her uniform, staring at nothing. She was young, only 29, and this was her first real command position. She had executed her orders perfectly. She had killed efficiently, and she felt sick. A knock on her door. She opened it to find Taman standing there. He had been brought in as a military advisor, his historical knowledge proving valuable for understanding the Krithax tactics. "May I come in?" he asked gently. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Taman sat down across from her. He didn't speak immediately, just sat there letting the silence stretch. Finally, Jihi broke. "We killed them," she said. "All those people on the stations, council citizens. We killed them without even trying to save them." "Yes," Taman said simply. "How do you live with that?" she asked. "With difficulty," Taman replied. "I've made similar choices. I've ordered strikes that killed innocents. I've sacrificed pieces to win the game, and every single one of those decisions sits heavy in my memory." "Then why do it?" Taman leaned forward. "Because the alternative is worse. If we had tried to save those hostages, how long would the battle have lasted? Days? Weeks? How many ships would we have lost? How many more colonies would the Krithax have taken while we were stuck in that one fight?" "I don't know," Jihi admitted. "Hundreds," Taman said. "Doyen ran the numbers. If we fight the council way, the Krithax win this war within 6 months. They take everything. Billions die. But if we fight the human way, we can end it in weeks. Millions die instead of billions. Neither choice is good, but one is less terrible than the other." "It still feels wrong," Jihia said. "Good," Taman said firmly. "The day it stops feeling wrong is the day you become the enemy. Humans can do terrible things when necessary. What separates us from species like the Krithax is that we know they're terrible. We carry the weight of our actions." He stood up to leave, then paused at the door. You did well today. You made hard choices and executed them properly. But don't try to pretend they weren't hard. Don't try to convince yourself it was easy. That weight you feel? That's your humanity. Keep it. After he left, Jihi sat in silence for a long time. Outside her window, she could see other ships in the fleet. Some were celebrating the victory. Others, like her, were processing what they had become. The war continued. More colonies were retaken. Each assault followed the same pattern: overwhelming force, no mercy, total victory. The Krethax began to retreat. For the first time since the war began, they were losing ground, but the cost was becoming apparent. The Council was winning, but their image of themselves was shattering. Species that had prided themselves on civilization were watching their forces commit acts they had always condemned. Some celebrated, others protested. The Council itself was fracturing. Doyen compiled reports on the psychological impact. Council soldiers were developing combat stress at rates never seen before. Not from losing, but from winning. From doing things that violated everything they believed about themselves. "We're breaking them," he told Admiral Gyong during a briefing. "I know," Gyong said, her face haggard. She hadn't slept properly in weeks. "But if we stop now, if we go back to fighting the Council way, we'll lose everything we've gained. The Krethax will adapt and come back stronger." "What if the Council removes you from command?" Doyen asked. "Then billions die," Gyong said simply, "and someone else will have to carry that weight." In the Council chambers, the debate raged. Speaker Thelnax found himself defending the very tactics he had once found abhorrent. Other leaders demanded that humanity be stripped of command, that the Council return to its principles even if it meant losing. "We are becoming monsters," one delegate said passionately. "Look at what we've done, look at what we've become." "We are becoming survivors," Thelnax countered. "There is a difference. The Krethax are monsters because they enjoy cruelty. We are simply doing what must be done." "And when the war is over?" another asked. "How do we go back to being civilized after this?" Thelnax had no answer. None of them did. On her ship, Hana received new intelligence. The Krethax home system had been located. Doyen's team had found it through captured communications and careful analysis. It was heavily defended but not impossible to reach. Admiral Gyong was already planning the assault. Not just a raid, but a full invasion. A decapitation strike to end the war completely. The plan required committing every available ship. It required tactics that would make everything they had done so far look restrained. When Hana read the full plan, she understood why human warfare wasn't taught in alien academies. Because once you truly understood it, once you saw what humans were willing to do to win, you could never look at the universe the same way again. The galaxy was about to learn what total war really meant, and there was no going back. The Krethax had learned. That was the terrifying part. They had watched the humans fight, studied their tactics, and adapted. Now they were using human methods against the Council, and they were good at it. The latest attack had been devastating. 3 core worlds hit simultaneously. The Krethax didn't try to preserve infrastructure anymore. They destroyed it. They didn't take prisoners for negotiation. They took them as shields. They had abandoned their own rules and adopted something worse than human warfare. They had adopted the brutality without the restraint. Commander Velshar stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the aftermath. He was a veteran now, if such a thing could happen in just a few months of war. The dignified officer who had questioned human methods was gone. In his place was someone harder, someone who understood what survival cost. "Sir, we have orders from Fleet Command," his tactical officer reported. Velshar read the orders. They were simple and clear. A Krethax supply convoy was moving through a nebula. Intelligence suggested they were transporting resources stripped from conquered colonies. The order was to intercept and destroy. No attempts at capture. No mercy. 6 months ago, he would have protested, would have argued for following proper protocols. Now he just calculated the best attack vectors. "Prepare for combat," he ordered. "Full weapons free. No warning shots." His crew, mostly Veltheran like himself, moved with practiced efficiency. They had learned. Just like the Krethax had learned. Everyone was learning, and the lessons were written in blood. The attack was swift and brutal. Velshar's squadron caught the convoy in the nebula, where their sensors were compromised. No chance to surrender, no opportunity to negotiate, just overwhelming firepower that left nothing but debris. Afterward, Velshar stood alone in his quarters. His reflection in the polished wall showed a stranger, someone who could order the destruction of dozens of ships without hesitation, someone who had become what he once feared. A message came through. Admiral Guyong requesting a private communication. He accepted. "Commander," Gyong said, her face looking as tired as he felt. "I read your after-action report. Efficient work." "Thank you, Admiral," Velshar replied formally. "How are you holding up?" she asked, and the question surprised him. It wasn't about tactics or strategy. It was personal. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "I look at what I've become and I barely recognize myself. I give orders that would have horrified me before the war. And the worst part is, I don't hesitate anymore." Gyong nodded slowly. "That's what war does. It changes you. The question is whether you remember why you're fighting, whether you can hold on to some piece of who you were." "Can you?" Velshar asked. "Some days," Gyong said quietly. "Some days I remember I'm doing this so others don't have to. So that maybe after the war they can go back to being civilized. Even if I can't," the communication ended. Velshar sat in silence thinking about her words, about the cost of victory and the price of survival. On another ship, Hana was dealing with her own crisis. Her crew was fracturing. The humans and the aliens no longer trusted each other. The humans thought the aliens were too soft. The aliens thought the humans were too brutal. Everyone was exhausted, traumatized, and angry. "Captain, we need to talk," her executive officer said. She was Veltheran and her voice carried the weight of speaking for half the crew. "About what?" Hana asked, though she already knew. "About the orders we're following. About the tactics we're using, Captain. We just destroyed a medical station because intelligence said the Krethax might be using it. Might be, we didn't verify. We just fired." "The Krethax use medical stations as cover," Hana said tiredly. "They put weapons in hospitals, military command centers, and schools. If we verify every target, we give them time to prepare, time to move, time to turn it into a trap." "But what if we were wrong?" the executive officer pressed. "What if that station really was just medical?" Hana met her eyes. "Then innocent people died. And I will carry that weight for the rest of my life. But if we had verified, if we had spent hours confirming the target, how many ships would the Krethax have destroyed in that time? How many other innocent people would have died?" "You're talking about acceptable losses," the executive officer said. "About treating people as numbers." "No," Hana said firmly. "I'm talking about impossible choices. Every option has a cost. I choose the options where fewer people die. That's all any of us can do." But even as she said it, Hana wondered if she believed her own words anymore. The line between necessary brutality and simple brutality was getting harder to see. In the council chambers, the arguments had reached a breaking point. Ambassador Yuna stood before the assembled delegates, trying to defend humanity's conduct of the war. It was not going well. "You have turned us into barbarians," a delegate accused. "We are no better than the Krethax now." "That's not true," Yuna argued. "The Krethax kill for pleasure and conquest. We kill to survive. There is a difference." "Is there?" another delegate asked. "We destroy without mercy. We kill without hesitation. We have abandoned every principle that made us civilized. How are we different?" Yuna took a breath. "We're different because we hate what we're doing. Because it weighs on us. Because when this war is over, we will remember every terrible choice we made. The Krethax won't, they'll just look for their next target." "That's not enough," the first delegate said. "Maybe not," Yuna admitted, "but it's all we have. The choice isn't between being civilized and being barbaric. The choice is between survival and extinction. Once the Krethax are defeated, then we can discuss how to rebuild our principles. But if we lose, there won't be anyone left to have that discussion." The debate continued, but Yuna knew it was pointless. The council was breaking apart. Some species were fully committed to the war effort. Others were calling for humanity to be expelled from the council entirely, even if it meant losing the war. Speaker Thelnax sat in his private chambers afterward, feeling every one of his years. He had led the council through decades of peace. Now he was presiding over its transformation into something he barely recognized. Admiral Gyong met with him that evening. She looked as exhausted as he felt. "We've located the Krethax home system," she said without preamble. "We have a plan to end this war. but it requires committing everything. Every ship, every resource, and the tactics required will make everything we've done so far look restrained. Tell me, Thelnak said. Gyong laid out the plan, a massive assault on the Krethax home system. Overwhelming force applied simultaneously to military, industrial, and civilian targets. The goal wasn't occupation. It was complete destruction of the Krethax ability to wage war. Ever. This is genocide, Thelnak said quietly. This is total war, Gyong corrected. We're not trying to kill every Krethax. We're trying to break their civilization so completely that they can never threaten anyone again. Some will survive, but they'll survive in a state where rebuilding their military will take centuries. And if I refuse to authorize this? Thelnax asked. Then the war continues, Gyong said. The Krethax have learned from us now. They're getting better. Every day we wait, they adapt more. Eventually, they'll match us. And when they do, this war will last decades. Billions will die instead of millions. Thelnax looked at the tactical displays showing the Krethax home system, a civilization of billions, about to face human total war doctrine. If I authorize this, he said slowly, the Council will never forgive me. History will remember me as the one who abandoned our principles. Probably, Gyong agreed. But history will also remember that you saved the Council from extinction. Sometimes the right choice and the remembered choice aren't the same thing. Thelnak sat in silence for a long time. Outside his window he could see ships moving in the orbital lanes. Each one carried people who trusted the Council to make the right decisions, who believed in the principles of civilization. I need to think, he said finally. We don't have much time, Gyong warned. The Krethax are preparing something big. We have a window of maybe 2 weeks before they're ready. After she left, Thelnak sat alone in the dark. He thought about his long life, about the thousands of years of Council peace he had studied. He thought about the future he had imagined where all species worked together in harmony, and he thought about the reality he now faced, where survival required becoming something terrible, where the price of peace was paid in blood and nightmares. He had always believed that civilization meant rising above violence. Now he was learning that sometimes civilization meant knowing when violence was necessary, and having the strength to accept the consequences. The decision weighed on him, but deep down he already knew what it would be. Because the alternative was unthinkable. The galaxy was about to see human warfare at its most complete, and everyone, human and alien alike, would carry the scars of it forever. The final vote took place in the Council chambers. Every delegate was present, either in person or through holographic projection. The chamber was silent as Speaker Thelnak stood to announce the decision. The motion to authorize Operation Final Dawn has passed, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of history. May whatever gods we worship have mercy on us all. In the fleet staging area, Admiral Gyong received the authorization. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only the grim determination of someone who understood exactly what she was about to do. All ships prepare for final operations, she transmitted. We jump in 6 hours. Across the fleet, thousands of ships began final preparations. Human vessels moved with practiced efficiency. Council ships moved with the careful precision of people doing something they had never imagined they would do. Hana stood on her bridge looking at her crew. Humans and aliens working together, united by something darker than peace, united by the necessity of survival. Captain, all systems ready, her tactical officer reported. The Veltharan's voice was steady now. He had learned. They all had. Good, Hana said. She activated the ship-wide communication. All hands, this is the captain. In a few hours we will jump to the Krethax home system. This will be the largest military operation in galactic history. Our mission is simple. End this war completely. I won't lie to you. What we're about to do is terrible. But it's necessary. When this is over, some of you will struggle with what you've done. That's normal. That's human. But remember, we're doing this so that future generations never have to. She paused, looking at the faces on her bridge. I'm proud to serve with all of you. Let's finish this. On another ship, Commander Velshar was giving his own speech, but his words were simpler. We do what we must. We survive. Everything else is secondary. His crew understood. They had become veterans not through time, but through necessity. They knew what war really was now. Not the theoretical exercises from the Academy, but the brutal reality of kill or be killed. In the intelligence center, Doyun was coordinating final preparations. He had spent weeks analyzing the Krethak's home system, identifying targets, planning strike patterns. His work would determine how many people lived or died in the next few hours. "Sir, final target package is ready," his assistant said. Doyun looked at the list. Military installations, industrial centers, communication hubs, power generation facilities, everything required to wage war. And yes, civilian casualties would be massive. There was no avoiding it when you were trying to break an entire civilization. "Send it to Fleet Command," he ordered. Taman watched the preparations from the command center. He wasn't a combat officer, but his knowledge of military history made him valuable for planning. He understood the patterns, the strategies that had worked throughout human history. "Thinking about Stalingrad?" Admiral Gyeong asked, walking up beside him. "Among other battles," Taman replied. "Sherman's march to the sea, the bombing of Germany, Hiroshima. Every time humans faced an enemy who wouldn't surrender, we had to make terrible choices." "And how did those choices work out?" Gyeong asked. "They ended wars," Taman said. "They saved lives in the long run, even if the cost was horrible in the short term. But they also scarred everyone involved, soldiers, civilians, entire nations. The price of victory was paid in nightmares that lasted generations." "Well," Gyeong said quietly, "the galaxy is about to pay that price." The fleet jumped, thousands of ships appearing in the Krethak's home system simultaneously. The arrival was coordinated with perfect precision, the result of human military planning applied to council resources. The Krethaks were ready. They had known an attack was coming eventually. Their home system was heavily defended with orbital stations, military fleets, and planetary defenses. But they weren't ready for this. No one could be ready for this. "All ships weapons free," Admiral Gyeong ordered. "Execute Operation Final Dawn." The assault began, not with careful strikes or proportionate response, with overwhelming, simultaneous, devastating firepower. Every target on Doyun's list was hit at once. Orbital stations exploded. Planetary shields failed under concentrated bombardment. Industrial centers burned. The Krethak's fleet tried to respond, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Human tactics applied through council ships destroyed their formations before they could properly engage. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. On Hana's ship, the crew worked in focused silence. Fire, adjust, fire again. Target after target eliminated. There was no time to think about what they were destroying. No time to consider the lives ending with each strike. Just the cold efficiency of war. Commander Velshar's squadron eliminated an entire Krethak's battle group. His commands were precise, his tactics flawless. He had learned from the best. He had become what the situation demanded. A warrior without mercy. The battle lasted 18 hours. By human standards, that was relatively quick for an operation of this scale. By council standards, it was an eternity of horror. When it was over, the Krethak's home system was broken. Their military was destroyed. Their industrial capacity was in ruins. Their ability to wage war was gone for at least a century, maybe longer. Millions were dead. Billions more faced a future of rebuilding from almost nothing, and the council forces had won. Completely, decisively, terribly. Hana sat in her captain's chair after the battle, staring at the damage reports. They had lost ships. Thousands of council personnel were dead, but they had won. The war was effectively over. She felt nothing. Not triumph, not relief. "Just emptiness, Captain," her executive officer said softly. "The Krethaks are transmitting. They want to surrender." Hana looked at the transmission. It was broadcast on every frequency, repeated in every language. A complete unconditional surrender. They were broken. "Forward it to Fleet Command," she ordered. Admiral Gyeong received the surrender with no visible emotion. She had expected this. The Krethaks were practical if nothing else. They knew when they were beaten. "All ships, cease fire," she transmitted. "Establish orbital control and prepare for occupation operations." She turned to her staff. "Begin humanitarian operations immediately. Medical supplies, food, temporary shelters. We broke them. Now we have to make sure they survive the peace." It was a strange contradiction. Showing mercy after showing none. But that was the human way. Brutal in war, generous in victory. Not because of any particular kindness, but because humans understood that how you end a war determines whether you have to fight it again. Back in council space, the news of the victory spread rapidly. Some celebrated. Others were horrified at what had been done in their name. The council was more divided than ever. Speaker Thelnax addressed the council one last time before stepping down. He knew his political career was over. He would be remembered as the leader who abandoned council principles, but he had done what was necessary. "We have won," he said simply. "We have survived. The cost was terrible, and we will carry the weight of our choices for generations. But we survived, and now we must decide what kind of civilization we want to be in the aftermath." He paused, looking at the assembled delegates. Human warfare is not taught in our academies because it is too effective, too brutal, too real. But we have learned it now. All of us, we cannot unlearn it. We can only choose how we use that knowledge going forward. Ambassador Yuna listened to his speech from the diplomatic gallery. She understood what he was saying. The galaxy had changed. The council had changed. There was no going back to innocent peace. Now there was only informed peace, maintained by people who understood the true cost of war. In the weeks that followed, the council established new protocols. Human military doctrine would be taught, but carefully, with context, with ethical frameworks. The goal was to create forces that could fight like humans when necessary, but would never forget why that was terrible. Taman was appointed to lead the new Strategic Warfare Institute. His first lecture was the same one he had given that day at the Academy, months and a lifetime ago. But the audience understood now. They had learned the hard way. He stood before the class and showed them Stalingrad, showed them what total war looked like, and this time no one laughed. No one dismissed it as primitive. They watched in silence, understanding that they had just fought their own Stalingrad, and survived it. Barely. "This is why human warfare isn't taught in alien academies," Taman said quietly. "Because once you truly understand it, you can never go back to who you were. You carry the knowledge forever. You carry the weight forever. And that weight is heavy." He looked at his students. Veterans now, all of them, changed by what they had seen and done. "The title of our course says it all," he continued. "You don't survive that twice. Once you experience total war, either as practitioner or victim, you do everything possible to prevent it from happening again. Not because war is wrong in some abstract sense, but because you know exactly how terrible it is. You've lived it." After class, Hana approached him. She was still recovering, physically and mentally. The war had aged her beyond her years. "Professor," she said, "do you think we did the right thing?" Taman considered the question carefully. "I think we did the necessary thing. Whether it was right is a question philosophers will debate for centuries. But I know this, we survived.